Hello, everyone. Welcome to the UMass Amherst Symposium on Computing for the Common Good. I'm Jim Flynn, the Assistant Dean of Research Business Development at the College of Information and Computer Sciences. As you can see, we have a full schedule planned for this first day of our two-day symposium. So I'd like to move right along by introducing our Dean, Dr. Laura Haas. Laura is going to give a brief overview before introducing our first keynote. Before joining the College of Information and Computer Sciences in 2017, Laura spent 36 years at IBM Research, where she rose to the level of IBM Fellow and served as director of the Accelerated Discovery Lab. Laura is a recipient of the Anita Borg Institute Technical Leadership Award, the ACM SIGMOD COD Innovation Award. She's also an ACM Fellow, a member of the National Academy of Engineering, and a fellow at the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. So I will now leave you in the capable hands of our Dean, Laura Haas.
Thank you so much for that generous introduction. I'm going to try and share my screen here. Okay, all right. So welcome everybody. Welcome to our first ever all college symposium. This has been quite a year, a difficult year to say the least. But there is now some light. We have effective vaccines and vaccination rates are rapidly rising. We are looking forward to a fall 2021 semester that may be very close to normal. Through it all, our faculty, staff, and students have persisted and played our part in keeping our community safe and innovating to address pressing issues such as contact tracing or the need for better personal protection. Our symposium is thus dedicated not only to computing for the common good, but to advancement of the common good in the broadest possible sense. Forward, there we go. So what is this computing for the common good? Computing for the common good is the revolutionary vision for computing research and education that unites our college. We put our vision and values into action in myriad ways, from the research topics we choose, to the education we deliver, to our diversity and inclusion efforts, all aligned around a desire to improve the well-being of the people of the Commonwealth and the world. Computing for the common good is our commitment to leverage our talents, knowledge, and effort to deploy computing technologies that improve the human condition. We are dedicated to making the world not only more prosperous, but also more free, inclusive, fair, healthy, and equal. Our college is a vibrant community committed to excellence. While we are young as a college in our 6th year, our CS program is one of the oldest in the nation. Our brilliant faculty and remarkable students have propelled us through their scholarship and impact into the top ranks of computer science programs. Our faculty, junior and senior, have received many honors, and we lead the university in research awards each year. We are driving innovation in key areas for Massachusetts and the nation, both areas of traditional strength for us, such as AI, machine learning, and networking, where we have some of the pioneers in those fields, and also in emerging fields, such as ethical computing, quantum information systems, and digital health. Every year, we educate more students, striving to meet the needs of our industry partners and the nation. We now graduate over 500 students every year, and admission is highly competitive to both our undergraduate and graduate programs. We are working steadily to improve the diversity of our student body, though we still have a ways to go. We are blessed with many industry, government, and foundation partners. This is just This chart here is just a small subset, who enable much of what we do in a myriad of ways. Let me give you just a few examples. MassMutual's major gift 5 years ago enabled the foundation of our Center for Data Science, including the hiring of over 8 stellar faculty, and it sponsors programs such as Data Science for the Common Good, which pairs small teams of students with nonprofits to tackle an important data analysis challenge for the nonprofit. Adobe has recently partnered with us to advance key research areas such as real-time machine learning and knowledge management. A portion of their gift established seed funding to encourage collaboration between our faculty and their researchers, allowing our faculty and students to impact the industry while helping Adobe make progress on some of their most challenging problems. Oracle has supported our efforts to create more equitable computing, as well as programs such as our Machine Learning and Friends lunch. These partnerships and many more power us forward. In acknowledgement of their importance, I am pleased to announce here our new strategic partnership program aimed at organizations that share our values and our commitment to our students and to innovative research. This new program offers additional ways for us to work together to advance our vision for economic and social impact. If you would like to learn more, please reach out to Julie Stubbs. Her email's at the bottom of the slide. So that's a whirlwind tour of our college. But now it is my honor and pleasure to introduce our featured speaker, Secretary Jay Ash, who will be presenting on hitting some function key, I'll let him explain, for the economy. What's recovery look like in Massachusetts? Secretary Ash is the president and CEO of the Massachusetts Competitive Partnership, a nonpartisan public policy group comprised of the CEOs of 16 of the largest businesses in Massachusetts. The partnership's vision to make Massachusetts one of the leading states for business investment and job creation, and one of the leading regions in the world in terms of overall competitiveness, has special resonance for us at the UMass flagship campus. Ash's work at the partnership focuses on policies and initiatives that make the Massachusetts economy stronger and more competitive, with priority areas that include education and workforce development, innovation and technology, and diversity and inclusion. Boston Magazine calls Ash the king of Corporate Hill. Prior to leading the partnership, Ash crossed party lines to serve as the Secretary of Housing and Economic Development in Governor Charlie Baker's first cabinet. As secretary, Ash was responsible for directing and executing Governor Baker's agenda on housing and community development, job creation, business development, consumer affairs, and business regulation. During his 4-year tenure, Ash headed up efforts to retain and attract businesses, promote the revitalization of communities, and support the prosperity of the state's residents. He is known as an energetic relationship builder with deep interest in seeing that prosperity in Massachusetts reaches all of its residents, including those of us in Western Mass. Ash previously served for 14 years as the city manager in his native Chelsea, Mass, where he grew the city's housing stock by over 10%, expanded its commercial base with 24 major projects, and won 2 All-America City designations. Ash also has served as a board member of the public policy think tank Mass Inc. and as an elected trustee of his alma mater, Clark University. He is a champion of both public higher education and industry academic research partnerships, and we are grateful that he is a stalwart friend of the university. Please join me in welcoming Jay Ash.
Laura, thanks so much. That was awesome. I actually am glad that that's recorded because I'm going to play that back to my kids at some point. because they just think of me as the stooge who is their father. So thank you, everyone. It's great to be with all of you. It's not lost upon me that it's lunchtime and that I'm talking to a group from Amherst. So I wish we were all at Antonio's Pizza having a slice, but maybe sometime in the future after we get through this COVID stuff, we'll all be able to do so. So I have never used the F functions on my computer screen on my laptop. So I think it's F5, which is a reset, but it might be F10 or it might be some other function. This is going to get me into my first slide. So this is a great way. I'm a bit intimidated talking to a group on information and computer sciences and not knowing a little bit of the science behind my keyboard, but it's not the first time that I've found myself in this situation. The second time is trying to get my slideshow to work. So give me 1 second here. There we go. So I'm going to sprinkle a little bit of pop culture and a little bit of Jay Ash and some of the things I do. But, sometimes when I'm talking about scientists, I feel like Rodney Dangerfield, that I don't get no respect. In fact, as secretary, I would often go around to science companies, mostly life science companies around the Commonwealth. And the tours that I would take were always the same. There'd be 5 or 6 guys, always guys, in white jackets, always a white jacket. And one of them would be telling me all about the science involved in their processes, molecules this and microorganisms that. And as the one guy would be talking, there'd always be somebody else who would be looking at me. And I could tell what that person was thinking. That person was thinking, we're talking about science and this guy is from government. He's not going to understand what we're saying. So at just the appropriate time, as I see this guy thinking about things, and before he'd blurt something out, I'd say, I want to interrupt for a second. You should all know that I majored in science in college. So I'm happy to share this with you as well. Although I don't know the F functions on my keyboard, I want you all to know that I've majored in science. So I feel pretty comfortable about talking about science. What I never told the guys in the white suits was that the science I majored in was political science. So I'm confessing that to you. I don't like the Zoom thing because usually I get a good laugh out of that in the crowd and I'm not feeling that reaction. But the fact of the matter is that while I may not be a computer scientist, while I may not be a life scientist, I've been a political scientist, and there's an awful lot of the same things that transpire about the way you go about things. So anyway, it's a great pleasure to be with you all. This picture was one of the awards that Chelsea won, was an All-American City Award. We won it twice, as Laura mentioned, and I haven't worn a tie in the last year. I don't plan on wearing that tie anytime soon. So as Laura mentioned, I am the president and CEO of the Massachusetts Competitive Partnership. Up on the screen are the logos of the 16 companies that I get to work with. What you should know about my trade association versus others is that in my trade association, the CEOs themselves have to participate in the organization's work. So when I have a board meeting, I have the CEOs of these companies to be able to talk to and more so listen to. I have to say that I've learned an awful lot from the CEOs over the last 2 years that I've been with them. These CEOs are together, and I'm happy to see, Laura, as you flashed up your sign of logos, I'm happy to see that 3 of our companies were on your slide as well. As Laura said, these companies are very much interested in what we can do collectively about the Massachusetts economy. I'm not responsible for the individual companies. I don't work on their individual plans. I might give them some advice here or there. But what they've done is they've hired me to think about how we can collectively have an impact on the Massachusetts economy. I'm really grateful for that opportunity. So let's talk about science for a bit. A little bit of pop culture. Thomas Dolby, she blinded me with science. By the way, here's a picture. Here's the science picture I was talking about. Here we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 guys taking me on a tour, all in white coats. What you should know about the computer science world, I'm not going to be able to tell you what you already know, but I will tell you that I want to share with you a little bit of what I understand about computer science as a major item for the future of our economy. It's certainly a major item. It's on our very short list of initiatives at MACP that we want to see implemented for the future of residents and the future of our economy. So to flash my science creds a bit, let me talk a little bit about what you're a significant contributor to. According to code.org, computing occupations are the #1 source of all new wages in the United States and make up over half of the projected new jobs in the STEM field. This makes computer science one of the most in-demand college degrees, and Laura's slides show the progress that you all are making in graduating more and more college degree holders. Laura, I hope we can keep all those 500 students and get even more here in Massachusetts, because as of January in 2021, there were 14,000 openings for computing jobs in Massachusetts with an average salary over $100,000. Computer science careers in Massachusetts also offer comparatively high paying salaries versus other jobs that are out there. Actually, the median salary for a computer science professional in Boston is $126,000, and that's much higher than the national average for all their occupations in the United States. The Bureau of Labor Statistics is also predicting that the number of computer science positions in the state will increase by 22% by 2026. So just as you are hoping to graduate more students into the computer science world, what our economy is seeing and doing is taking all of those and wanting more. So the Bureau of Labor Statistics is projecting that jobs in software development, for example, will grow by 24% by 2026, just in 5 years. And that means that Massachusetts will continue to look for the talent necessary in order to fuel that which we are doing here in Massachusetts. We have currently in the Boston area another example. There's over 200 openings in development and in engineering. And yet, with all of that, there are some concerns. Only 5,600 exams were taken in AP Computer Science by high school students in 2020. A major theme of this discussion, and a discussion that we should have every time we talk about workforce and education, is what the experience is from females and from students of color. In this case, of the 5,600 exams that were taken, only 30% were taken by female students, only 8% were taken by Latino students, and only 6% were taken by Black students. So we have a long way to go in making sure that underrepresented populations get great training and access to great jobs. What we're seeing in Massachusetts schools is that some schools have adopted a computer science program. For those schools that offer an AP program, 55% of them offer an AP computer science course. But what we're also seeing is that there are fewer AP exams taken in computer science than in any other STEM subject area. A real concern for my organization and for all of us that focus in on STEM and the impact that it can have on our economy. Probably the most troubling stat, and something that, again, belays my concerns, is that teacher preparation programs in Massachusetts did not graduate a single new teacher prepared to teach computer science in 2018. Oh my God. And here we are, a society that's relying more and more on computer science. We need the talent in order to fuel that computer science. In Massachusetts, the great news is that if you teach them, they have jobs available for them, and yet we're not even teaching the teachers to get us there. So some concerns are abounding, but let's end this section of my comments on an upbeat note. Former IBM chair, CEO, and president Ginny Rometty has called what we're going through right now a digital transformation. And that digital transformation she has called the fourth industrial revolution. I wonder if all of you think of yourselves as revolutionaries, because you actually are. The transformation you're making possible is remarkable. And let's talk about one example. Laura talked about digital health. Let's talk about telehealth for a minute. I read a statement recently from a healthcare leader who said the pandemic did in a few short months what he thought was going to take a decade or longer for telehealth to do. I may be off on my numbers a bit, but a major healthcare system recently told me that they went from 1,200 telehealth visits a year prior to the pandemic to having done over 2 million telehealth visits, and the year wasn't over. So digital health, telehealth is expanding, and it's not the only place. I mean, this past week alone, I've had conversations about fintech, I've had conversations about cybersecurity, and I hope you're all ready for this, but I had a conversation this week about a driverless, Uber-like flying taxi, all coming to us. To no one's surprise, computer science continues to play a huge role in the evolving innovation in our economy. So you're all visionaries, you're all conduits, and yes, you are revolutionaries. So now that's the end of the speeches, preaching to the choir, or putting it another way, sucking up to the audience. So let me share some thoughts with you about where our economy is. So for those of you who don't follow me on Twitter, there's my Twitter handle. Those of you who are Twitter users, you know that this has become a big thing before and after, or I should say before and during. So before the pandemic hit, we were all flying high. There we are on the Titanic, enjoying the view and thinking the world was in our hands. And since the COVID has come, unfortunately for many, the Titanic has sunk. So let's talk a little bit about pre-COVID. Let's talk a little bit about what's happened during the pandemic. And then I'm going to touch a lot upon what I expect to happen as we get out of this pandemic, as we all get vaccinated, and as life gets back to somewhat, I call it the next normal. So, pre-COVID, let's remember the U.S. was in the longest economic expansion ever. It was more than 2 decades, more than a decade, a great run that we had. Massachusetts economy was the envy of many others. And in fact, U.S. News and World Report said that Massachusetts had the top business environment. We had the highest employment numbers ever. All of that led to good news for state budget writers, because we were generating billion-dollar surpluses even after increased levels of spending by state government. We had the fastest growing population in the Northeast. If people are the fuel, of talent is the fuel to our economy, being a fast growing place is critically important. My good friend Ed Markey, Senator Markey, used to talk about the smartest workforce being in Massachusetts, and he coined the term that we were the brain state, not the Bay State, but the brain state. And the facts back that up. Nearly 50% of our residents have at least a bachelor's degree. We're number 1 in the country as that. And our standings in K through 12 education put us number 1. CBRE, a real estate company, has talked about the life sciences industry, which is very important to Massachusetts, as unabated demand for life science space. All of us are fascinated, I'm sure, with the Moderna success, which happened here in Massachusetts. As secretary, I got to tour Moderna, actually gave them a grant to help them establish a lab here in Massachusetts, manufacturing facility here in Massachusetts. Unabated demand for life sciences. That's an awesome place to be. And in fact, if Massachusetts was its own country, and in fact, sometimes it feels like it is, but if Massachusetts was its own country, we would be number 4 in GDP per capita. That was pre-COVID. So now COVID comes. It's fair to say that none of us have ever seen anything like this, including unemployment claims. We went from the under 3% unemployment rate to high double digits in unemployment rate, high teens, I should say. We know that sectors, there were certain sectors that were particularly hit, leisure and hospitality, restaurants, personal services, construction, food. Main Street has really been hit, and eds and meds, a bellwether for our economy, were hit pretty hard too. And because those sectors were hit, workers in those industries felt the brunt of what's happened in unemployment and in risk. And that's disproportionately focused have fell upon women and minorities. So there have been uneven impacts on women, on those without a college education, on low-wage earners, on Blacks and Latinxes, on young workers. And, we have good news coming out now. I mean, there was a mention about the February job report recently that the U.S. economy added almost 380,000 jobs in February. That was great news. In December, the jobs had actually declined by 300,000. Great news. But while unemployment in February went down for whites, women, Asians, and Hispanics, it actually went up for Blacks. White unemployment rate in Massachusetts is 5.6%, and Blacks it's 9.9%. So we have a long way to go. Long way to go. Washington Post has called what's happened during our recession as the most uneven impact of any recession. And for those whose incomes were not interrupted, I suppose there's some good news. I mean, there's been a tremendous personal savings rate. And so the capacity to spend is really high. I mean, people like myself, we're doing real fine. And hopefully we're not only spending, but we're contributing. We're contributing to philanthropy. We're continuing to those less fortunate. So uneven impacts. Some have lost everything. You think about restaurants that have closed and have lost everything. For those of you who haven't been in Boston recently, my office is on Boylston Street. I walk Newbury Street all the time. And I would say that 60% of the storefronts on Newbury Street are currently vacant. So a lot of tough stories coming out of the pandemic, but a lot of people are doing okay as well. So we need to make sure that people that are doing okay are thinking about and doing more than thinking, are actually acting to help those who are less fortunate. In terms of state budget is doing remarkably fine. Some of that is because the federal government has made huge investments to keep people and businesses afloat. You think about the PPP, a Paycheck Protection Program, what's happened with unemployment insurance, and for the first time, people in the gig economy being able to take advantage of unemployment. You think about stimulus bumps that have happened for unemployment, and you think about the stimulus checks that have gone out. So a lot of help from Washington. The state tax revenues are doing fine, and good news for budget writers on Beacon Hill is that Washington just sent more stimulus, including nearly $8 billion to support the state budget that was already ahead of anticipated revenues. So businesses, and frankly, those that have been employed on the whole are doing okay. In Q4, Massachusetts GDP was 2 times the US growth. That was great, 7.9% for Massachusetts versus 4% for the nation. Again, Q4 payroll employment increased by 50% higher in Massachusetts than the rest of the country. Wage and salary growth was 200% higher than the nation. Some of this is certainly catching up from the lag in previous quarters, but some of it is about our ability, once we turn the corner, to be able to grow in areas that the economy values. The last thing I'll say about where we have been is that KPMG has really said it the best. The best stimulus is vaccinations. So really excited about everything the federal government has done, but boy, when we all get stuck, things are going to be good. And I'm certainly, like many of you, looking forward to that. So thinking about post-COVID, again, pop culture, waiting to exhale, a famous scene, Angela Bassett blowing up, torching her boyfriend's car. I think we all want to torch 2020, let it be the year that we never talk about again. What last year has demonstrated is that public health and the economy are intertwined. And there's a general feeling about from most economists and other observers that that vaccination will lead the economy to a robust, and I want to emphasize the term robust, 2021. Here in Massachusetts, we have an underlying strength, and you're part of that underlying strength. Underlying strength of the Massachusetts economy is innovation. And a fundamental of that innovation is young people who are in our schools, in our communities. And Fundamental strength of Massachusetts is that young people want to be in cities. So Boston is going to see a flood of young people again. Springfield, Worcester, cities. Young people want to be in cities, and so that provides opportunities for us, and especially for the business community. As I've noted, we're well educated. So again, a strength of ours. We've got a great mix of industries. We have a concentration in high growth industries. I've mentioned life sciences and healthcare, but even before the pandemic, even before there was talk about needing to do more pharmaceutical manufacturing in the United States, there was already an onshoring effort around manufacturing that's going on. And now with that biopharma prioritization on domestic production, we expect to see more manufacturing opportunities. I'll talk a little bit about that later. AIM, the Associated Industries of Massachusetts, has a business confidence index, and it's been up for 5 straight months. Right now, it stands at the highest since the pandemic hit. And as I mentioned before, JAsh is flush with cash. Consumers are flush with cash, and we're ready to spend. So there's reason to believe that our economy is ready to exhale, and we're going to take off. Best cartoon that I've seen about work from home? I can't remember. Do I work at home or do I live at work? I'm currently talking to you from my living room in Danvers, Massachusetts. I'm 20 miles away from my office. I get into the office every now and then, but do lots of my work from home. What I've heard from our companies is that work from home actually hasn't been so bad. It's actually worked for people. I heard a great story yesterday of a high performer whose job it was to travel the country regularly. And she's been home for the last year, and she's been hitting all of her performance goals. And she's also gotten used to eating at home with her kids and putting her kids to bed every night. And now she's starting to ask herself, why do I have to go back out on the road again when I was every bit as effective working from home? Lots of employers are asking that question. Certainly lots of employees are asking that question. So we expect that it's going to have an impact on what the next normal or the new normal looks like once we all get vaccinated. So for sure, employees want flexibility. Having said that, I hope you're not experiencing this right now with my speech, but there is some Zoom fatigue that's setting in. Zoom can do a lot for us. It doesn't replace the face-to-face interactions we've had. For me, I never thought I'd say this, but I miss the rubber chicken dinner circuit. I miss the opportunity to go to events and run into people and have by chance conversations. And, you think about those opportunities, or you think around water coolers. There are things that Zoom can't do and the face-to-face will do. But with Zoom fatigue, I suspect that some of us are going to feel better when we get our kids back in school. And we start to go in the office a couple of days a week, but not every day of the week. It's hard for me to see, based upon all the companies I talk to, and again, it's not only my 16 companies, but I talk to a lot of other companies. It's hard for me to see that our companies are going to come back to the office in full. I think we'll come back, see lots of people coming back around the beginning of the fall. But I don't see them coming back 5 days a week. In fact, some employers have actually suggested to me the mentality is going to be, why are you coming into the office? Or what do you need to come into the office for? So when I think about the return to the office, I think about it as a bell curve. There'll be a few companies that'll require people to be in 5 days a week. There are certainly some jobs where you need to be in 5 days a week. And there'll be a few companies that won't require you to be in at all. And, there are jobs that don't require you to be in at all. But my guess is that what we're going to see is a 3 to 4 day in the office work week and a day or two at home. So I want to talk to real estate demand. So meanwhile, back at the office, one of my favorite shows, real estate demand in Greater Boston. I'm going to tell you a little bit about what I hear. And after I tell you about what I hear, I'm going to tell you a little bit about what I fear. So first, what I hear. Yes, vacancies are up. There is negative absorption that's taking place, which means that there are less people renting and less occupancy within office spaces. But the office market trend seems to be stabilizing. You should know that there's a huge demand for big tracts of land in Greater Boston. The closer to the urban center, the better. Large warehouses and e-commerce are looking for that. For those of you who have been in Eastern Massachusetts in the city of Revere. There's a Showcase Cinema right on Route 1, my favorite movie house. I love going to the movies. Well, Amazon has acquired the Showcase Cinema and is going to turn that into a warehouse for e-commerce. So we're seeing a lot of that. Even as you get further away from Boston, outside of 128, even up to 495, there are signs of rents trending upwards, especially for these large warehouse e-commerce sites. If you go back to the core, there was an expectation that rents were going to come down, especially in offices, that rents were going to come down, but they haven't come down substantially. And there was a lot of sublet space out in the market initially, but that's all being pulled back as well. The rents have been dropped. The rents have dropped a little bit, but not as much as the past two recessions. And while yes, some people are taking up less space, there are other things that are causing people to just hit the pause button for a minute and think about things. First of all, the initial panic is over, right? People are relaxed a bit more, and certainly the knowledge that the vaccinations were on the way and now people are actually getting vaccinated give people a little bit more confidence about being in an office. Let's face it, lots of businesses were making money during this period of time. Again, lots of businesses, commerce was still going on and can still afford to pay rent and keep their options open. Although many of us may not be in full time, when you do come in, you're likely to be more spread out. So if you think about people per 1,000 square feet in offices, it's gotten up to a point where pre-pandemic, there were about 8 or 9 or 10 people per square feet in offices, some places even 11 that were really pushing the occupancy rates. That's going to come down. When I started in the business 30 years ago, it was like 3, 4, or 5 people per 1,000. My guess is going to be in the 5, 6, 7. There'll be a lot of hoteling of space. You won't own an office. You'll own a space when you come into work. So the point is that, we may not all be in at the same time, but when we're in, we're going to be spread out a little bit more. Companies are still anticipating future growth. I hear that from companies all the time. Certainly the stock market has factored in future growth. Some vacancies that do exist are being converted to lab space. Again, keep in mind the idea about the Massachusetts economy and life sciences taking up all that lab space. So perhaps the best way I can describe where we are is that I think there's some patient caution being exhibited. And lots of companies are going to take a look. At least that's what I'm hearing. Lots of companies are going to take a look at what their needs are before they act. In suburban markets, the rents are actually up too, not as high as compared to Boston. And that's good news that there's still attractive spaces available. Suburban marketplaces are really benefited from having parking available versus public transportation. Be really interesting to see what happens with the MBTA. If you haven't been on the MBTA lately, I was on the MBTA, and I'll tell you that I looked suspiciously at everyone else who was on the MBTA, wondering if that was the person that had the COVID. So I don't think there's going to be a rush back to MBTA anytime shortly. And so suburban market locations are particularly attractive. And certainly the open spaces that are offered in suburban markets are really attractive. So that's what I hear from people or companies like CBRE and JLL, large leaders in the real estate market. Here's what I fear, and I call it my frozen pipe theory. When a pipe freezes, you don't see the water explode out yet. It's not until the ice starts to thaw and a split in the pipe has happened that the water starts coming out. So in my frozen pipe theory, the freeze is the pandemic and the thaw is the pandemic subsiding. I think we're just starting to see some leaks, though they're not aged enough to have been picked up in the statistical reports that I read from the likes of JLL and CBRE. So here's an example. This past weekend, John Hancock, who's the state's 35th largest employer, announced plans to close 2 of their locations, suburban locations, one in Westwood, Mass, 9,500 square feet, and another in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, 103,000 square feet. This number blows me away. That represents a 22% reduction in John Hancock's overall New England footprint. 22% reduction, 35th largest employer in Massachusetts. I wonder if that isn't that the freeze has thawed out and the water is starting to explode out. Now, the good news is that the 900 employees that were in those companies are keeping their jobs. And John Hancock is saying that that workforce can work out of its Boston location. That's the good news. The bad news is that 22% reduction in our footprint. That's not good. If other companies start dropping similar spaces, you're going to start to see that some tertiary and secondary and tertiary locations are going to start to experience some problems. And certainly the amenities that support those offices are going to see some problems as well. So I do believe that it's not reflected in the statistics that have been reported yet. I think that companies will take some real estate savings. I think Hancock is only one of many examples that have already done that. Our own survey, we do a survey at MACP, suggests that 30% of the companies that we surveyed over 100 companies, says that they are thinking about either moving people or real estate holdings outside of Massachusetts. So even if half of them did that, that would be significant. Now, again, life sciences can make up for some of that. The life sciences demand is crazy, and I think we're going to see an outmigration finally out of Cambridge to some suburban locations. So there's evidence that the life sciences will pay a premium to be in Cambridge for lab space. That means they may actually pay a premium to be in manufacturing space that's proximate to Cambridge. So that's good news for suburban locations, and certainly Worcester and in places west of Worcester. And as we start to think about preventing the next pandemic, there's massive federal investment that's going to focus on doing more manufacturing of pharmaceuticals here. That means that there's even more opportunity for this sector, and even greater importance of Massachusetts as being part of this. So my summary is that this suggests that the real estate may lag the general economy's resurgence. We haven't talked about retailing and restaurants. That is certainly going to lag in terms of recovery. Let's talk about retail. There's been an acceleration of the consolidation that was already happening. We saw lots of retailers consolidating spaces, and when we went to the malls, there were already vacancies pre-pandemic. Some of our old department stores may be gone, but many are excited. Many new retailers are excited about being able to right size into retail space. And there are opportunities for new concepts in retails and in restaurants. Speaking of restaurants, I went out to one of my local favorites here in Eastern Massachusetts, Jimmy's, the other night on Route 1 in Saugus. And it was like pre-pandemic times. It was a long wait to get in. The place was very active. I went to the gym yesterday for the first time in a great deal of time. I go to Planet Fitness, and I thought I had traveled in a time machine back sometime into the future, because all of the machines were taken and it was really busy. So the point is that when it comes to retails and restaurants, there have been losers, but that pent up demand that we all have to be in retail locations, to be in restaurants, to be in gyms, means that there are going to be opportunities for those that have survived to thrive, and for new ones to come along. So really sorry for those who have lost, but many entrepreneurs will step up, and I expect that consumerism is going to be back in full force in 21 and 22. So to just touch briefly on the outside of the greater Boston real estate market, in general, the condition depends upon the sector you're talking about and the location that you're in. The good news is that places outside of Boston will continue to be a low-cost alternative. The bad news is that there are lower cost alternatives further away out of Massachusetts, and we'll talk about that in just a little bit. But the pandemic has accelerated people's companies' beliefs in being able to do business from afar, so that could have a negative impact. For places like Western Mass, you do present yourself with a low-cost alternative in terms of rent, but not necessarily in terms of labor costs or energy costs or taxes or cost of regulation. So, I have some real concerns about secondary and tertiary markets, as I've mentioned before. Many of those markets weren't fully developed during the last boom, and that lasted for decades. So they may be even more challenged into the future. And, when I think about places like Worcester and Springfield, I'm seeing what's happening with John Hancock and Westboro and Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and I get a little bit concerned. And yet, this morning I was talking to Rick Sullivan, the president of the Western Mass Economic Development Council, and he said that he's seeing more inquiries for largely manufacturing and distribution type activities than there were in the pre-pandemic. Let's recognize that inquiries aren't the same as getting contracts. But the fact of the matter is that there are a lot of people that are out there looking, and there's an opportunity in the upswing that's happening in this economy for people that didn't have a chance to compete before to make their best case going forward. So let's talk about labor for a minute. So I didn't do the full Monty reference here. That would have been an easy one, but movie theaters, this is a great sign. We'll be close to further notice. My movie theater, as I said, has gone out of business, and Amazon has taken over. We have a ways to go when you talk about theaters and restaurants and hotels and restaurants to get back to hiring. I was listening to Secretary Acosta from the state's Labor and Workforce Development Office last week, and she said that we're down 350,000 jobs, and 250,000 of those jobs may never come back. That's certainly bad news, but the effort to get those people back to work is ongoing, and we're talking about adult training and future hiring commitments and the like. So, you think about, we talked about the Greater Boston fundamentals are strong, and that's where it starts about thinking about labor and the general economy. I do worry about secondary and tertiary markets, but in general, there are strong fundamentals, innovation, life sciences, as I mentioned, the younger workers wanting to be in urban lifestyles, the pent-up demand that exists, people to come back to great places like Massachusetts. So I'm expecting that there'll be a strong recovery in the job market. The Boston Fed says that unemployment will get under 4% by 2023. If you think about pre-COVID, we had a tight labor market. It's easy to imagine a way that we get back to that tight labor market. And if you think about, I think it was yesterday, the day before, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD, an international organization of economists, said that they expect that the US GDP for 2021 to be a whopping 6.5%. That'll be the greatest expansion that we've seen in 35 years. So my expectation is that businesses will be hiring and talent will be at a premium again. In addition, the labor pool could be tight because there are some people that have gone elsewhere. I'm sure we all know people that have relocated to other locations. So to the extent that in-person workers are in demand, we might have a smaller pool of that. Immigration is certainly slowed, and that's a major consideration for the Massachusetts economy. We need that in immigration. I worry about working moms coming back into the workforce, and I certainly hope we can bring them in, but I don't think we can take that for granted. So we need to direct our attention to working moms and making sure that they can get back into the workforce. Certainly, work from home will help with that, and as I said, I think work from home is here to stay. I'd argue, though, that there's increasing pressure to be back in the office at least some part of the time. The collusion of ideas around the water cooler, the networking, the results, and promotions and bonuses are all going to be felt. So I don't think that, people like our mom who is crisscrossing around the country and enjoys being at home now will need to do that as often. I do think that there's a possibility of a great career and a greater role with being with one's children every day. I feel like we can get the balance of the two. Last thing I'll say about the labor market is that, Massachusetts is on its way to a $15 minimum wage. If that happens nationally, that'll mean that we'll have a better chance of keeping some of our non-skilled and semi-skilled work here. So now a PSA. So my PSA is a combination of still pop culture, no more Hidden Figures scenes. This picture disturbs me so much. Single Black woman in a room full of white guys. And we need to make sure that as we grow out of this latest pandemic and recession, that we're aware of growing past our past. And, this first hit me when I was doing some research around Fortune 500. I'm going to accelerate this a bit. Currently, there are 41 women who lead Fortune 500 companies, and only 5 Blacks. And 2 of those Blacks are set to retire. I can't help but say to myself, this is 2021. I can't believe that this is where we are on gender and racial equity, but in fact, this is where we are. So this is just one way of many to say that we feel that gender and racial equity, including economic equity for decades, if not generations, if not centuries. I've got CEOs. The good news is I've got CEOs that are taking action, and that reflects our society taking action. And I do believe that if we're intentional about our efforts and we continue to look at pictures like this and be disturbed by it, that we'll be able to overcome some of the troubling statistics that I want to just quickly share with you as part of my PSA. Median family wealth, median, of course, being 50% higher, 50% lower. Median family wealth for a white family nationwide, $188,000 versus $24,000 for a Black family. Poverty level for white family, 12% versus 26% for a Black family. College attainment, 35% for whites, 21% for Blacks. Middle-aged families with a retirement account, 65% for whites, 44% for Blacks. Home ownership, 72% for whites, 42% for Blacks. 1 year business capital received, the first year business capital received for white businesses, $106,000 versus $35,000. Small businesses that have succumbed to the recession, 17% versus 41% of Black businesses have succumbed to the recession. We got a lot of work to do, and as part of my PSA, I challenge you all to be part of the solution and recognize that we can make a difference on all these statistics and much more. So I'm rounding the bend and heading to the curve. Monty Python fans, don't crucify me. I didn't feel like I should put up the crucifix on this slide, but we'll remember that always look at the bright side of life. That great song that came out of The Life of Brian. You know, the good news is the federal government has kept the economy from cratering. You know, $5 trillion in stimulus. You know, you think about our GDP for 2020 was just above $20 trillion. And the federal government has taken a massive step to make sure that our economy has a chance at emerging the way that it can. Of course, we have to pay for this down in the future, so we'll have to think about this. You know, Beacon Hill is doing fine, as I mentioned, with the American Rescue Plan, and interest rates continue to remain low. Firms have capital to invest. There's lots of dollars out there chasing returns. I mean, look at the stock market. The Dow Jones Industrial Average hit another record high yesterday. Lots of people have money saved up. There's pent-up demand. Leisure and hospitality. Disney stock is up 150% from its COVID lows. Expedia is up 300% from its COVID lows. So I have high hopes for the consumer. And as we know, consumers make up 20% of the economy. So lots of future questions out there. You know, I feel like I need to be Doc Brown from Back to the Future to figure some of these out. You know, I would suggest that state and local, I wonder if state and local budgets will hold up long term. I'm concerned about commercial and residential loans, what housing instability may mean, which industries are going to go up or down. You know, how does federal policy get us back or not through a full recovery, and how do we pay for all the stimulus money? And it goes on and on. I would tell you that K through 12 recovery is an important thing, and getting immigration right is important. And as we get to our next normal, we need to make sure that we protect against the next global crisis, of course, a pandemic or a climate change problem. We need to reconnect to our democratic principles. We need to create some job parity and tackle systematic inequalities that exist out there. So I'm really optimistic about what the future may hold for us. I do have just a cautionary note, and then I'll turn this back over. My cautionary note is that you know, we're in an increasingly more competitive economic society. So Massachusetts has been losing residents to non-tax states of Florida and New Hampshire right along. Some states with higher tax rates than us have been losing businesses. California has lost 1,800 businesses in 1 year, with Texas, a non-tax state, getting a lot of them. We need to be mindful of policy that should be focused on job creation in our full recovery, as opposed to pushing our businesses further away from the Massachusetts economy. So I'm a little bit concerned about that. But in general, I'd end this with saying that, you know, for those of us who have made it through the pandemic, we're ready to grow. For those of us who have experienced losses, we remember those losses and we honor those losses by making sure that we do everything we can to make sure that this doesn't happen again, and that those who have suffered and are still with us get better as they go along. So Laura, great pleasure to be with all of you. Happy to take a few questions if any exist. And I'm going to take a drink, and wow, that was a 45-minute, I've never given a speech that long before. So anyway, Laura, it's all yours.
That was a wonderful speech, and you did have people laughing, I promise you.
Hey, all right. Were they laughing with me, Laura, or laughing at me? That's the question.
With you, absolutely with you, Jay.
Yeah. I can't get the vision of that tie out of my head right now. There's been a couple of questions. I've been monitoring the chat and the Q&A feature, and I just want to tell everybody out there that if you have questions, there's a Q&A feature at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Please feel free to ask, and if we have time allows, then we'll get to your question. If not, then we'll try to follow up later on that. So Jay, there is we did have a couple of questions come in, and one that is sort of near and dear to us in the computer science and the higher ed field. And that is that we train an awful lot of international students, particularly on the graduate and PhD level. And in the last few years, it's been sort of challenging for them because of uncertainties in immigration and in visa policies. Do you see that changing in the next few years? And if so, also, do you see any of the CEOs in your mass competitive partnership, are they taking initiatives with that situation?
Yeah, it's a great question. Before I answer that question, I want to acknowledge Jamie, who's signing for us. And Jamie, thank you so much for everything that you do and making sure that we can communicate with everybody. Jim, great question. If not for immigration, Massachusetts would be a net loser of population. And if you believe that talent is the most important thing that fuels an economy, then you need to have the people that can do that. And that's on all ends of the spectrum. So, you know, many of the low-wage jobs that we've had have been fueled by immigrants. You know, the old Hamilton line, immigrants, we get the job done. Thank you, immigrants, for doing that. And on the upper end, you know, business startups by immigrants, medical advances, innovation, patents by immigrants. So the Massachusetts economy definitely relies upon immigrants. And, oh, by the way, so do our colleges and universities. So we're all in lockstep there. Yes, I mean, you know, the immigration policy reflects leadership in Washington, and our leadership in Washington, I think, understands the connection much more about the connection between immigration and a healthy economy. Like many people, I'm hoping that Washington can figure out a way to come up with a sound immigration policy that everyone can support and then get behind and let's go. In the meantime, yeah, there's an expectation, and there's been a vocalization of that expectation by CEOs, not only in Massachusetts, but around the country, that we need to bring in more and more residents into the United States, and especially into Massachusetts, in order to be able to enjoy continued economic advances. So yes, I expect that's going to happen, and we'll continue to advocate for that as well.
That's really good to hear. I think you made a bunch of our students happy.
Another question that came in, and I think you touched on it already, Jay, but you know, sort of similar to that, in addition to helping our international students, there's also a big incentive to increase diversity, specifically in the tech and the computer science computer science realms. Do you see anything from your experience with state government or with the Mass Competitive Partnership for initiatives that are going to improve our, say, gender and other diversity scores in the tech industry?
Yes, great question. And the short answer is an emphatic yes. The last major initiative I was involved with Governor Baker on before I left in December of 2018 was bringing in an organization called Apprenti. Apprenti is a state of Washington training program that works so successfully that it's replicated. Federal government wanted to replicate throughout the U.S. And Apprenti introduces underrepresented populations, women, people of color, and veterans, the disabled, into apprenticeships. And we all know the importance of internships and apprenticeships, into tech-specific jobs. So there was an example pre-pandemic of what was happening. All of you on the call that are interested in this issue, you should take great comfort in knowing that even before the pandemic, my CEOs, when they got into the boardroom, oftentimes would find themselves lamenting that they wanted to do better when it comes to hiring in tech fields of underrepresented populations. Now, with the racial reckoning that I'm sad to say it's taken too long for this country to get to, but I'm happy to say we're here, and I'm thrilled to be part of it. There's a huge opportunity. So I hear CEOs talking about underrepresented populations in a different way. An example would be there's an effort that Bank of America and several other companies have undertaken called the 110 commitment, 1 million hires of Black employees in 10 years. I expect other efforts like that are going to pop up. And so, you know, you think about the companies that are around us and what they're doing. My anticipation, Jim, and everyone who's on the call, is that they're going to meet and exceed their goals. We're already seeing evidence of it now. You know, again, looking at Bank of America, for example, in income inequality, Bank of America has raised its minimum wage to $20 an hour, even in places that don't have a $15 minimum wage. I mentioned that Massachusetts is the third highest. The lowest minimum wage in the country is Georgia. Georgia often has to default to the federal minimum wage is $7 an hour, and yet Bank of America is going to pay all of its employees in Georgia $20 an hour who are making the minimum wage. So that's really good, a good place to be in. Company after company, Mass Mutual, I'm going to highlight as a good Western Mass company, has joined something called the CEO Action for Racial Equity. And CEO Action for Racial Equity is going to be leading on things like making sure that when it comes to underrepresented populations and when it comes to sectors where those underrepresented populations have not found their way, that the path will be illuminated, and that the arms at the other hand will be open and welcoming when people get good training like they do at UMass Amherst.
If I can follow up on that for just a minute, Jay, I'm wondering if you have seen particular programs by your various companies that you interact with that are reaching into the schools. And what are we doing? You said earlier, very early on, you just really shy. I knew that, but I didn't know that, you know, with your statistics about what's going on in the schools and the small numbers that we're seeing. So what are your best practices or best shining examples that you would like to see more of how we can do more outreach to get more kids into tech in these diverse categories?
Laura, I love when academics ask me the questions that I know the answers to. So that's awesome. By the way, this is not rehearsed for all of you who are saying, oh yeah, they rehearsed this. I had no idea this question was coming. So each of us, so I want to talk about, no, I'm not going to go too far on this. Arnie Goodman was my seventh grade English teacher. And what he used to always say is when you point a finger at somebody, your thumb points back at you. I think about that all the time. And every time I point at an issue, I say, what is my responsibility to that issue? So first and foremost, we all have an obligation, not a responsibility, an obligation to figure out how we can make a difference in the lives of our young people and certainly in education. So me personally, as authorized by the 16 CEOs, I've actually adopted a vocational school. I am spending an awful lot of time with Madison Park Technical Vocational High School, which is in Roxbury in Boston. For those of you who don't know Madison Park, 98% of the student population is students of color. In Boston, 98% students of color, and yet only 10% of the eligible students for internships got internships. It just doesn't make sense that in the middle of all the commerce that's going on, that the only vocational school in Boston would not be able to connect with employers. So responsibility for all of us to figure out how we can make a difference. We're busily expanding the partnerships that they have with the business community to expand internships and do other things for and with the students. So that's on the the micro level and the personal level. On a macro level, STEM education, a huge priority for us. And so our companies have been at the forefront. In fact, my board chair, Jeff Leiden from Vertex, is also the chair of the state STEM council, along with Lieutenant Governor Karen Polito and former Congressman Joe Kennedy. In your name is computer science. What you'll all be happy to hear is that, and I alluded to it in my comments, that we have very few priorities because we like to be narrow and deep in the work we do. And yet one of our priorities, one of the few priorities we have, is around computer science and making sure that every kid in every school, in every community in Massachusetts has an opportunity to learn computer sciences. And frankly, folks, even though we brag about how educated we are and we brag about our innovation here in Massachusetts, we're behind the country when it comes to computer sciences in classrooms. So our CEOs are taking up that cause. And I'll mention just two more quick things. One, early pre-K, early education. CEOs are rallied around early education in Massachusetts, in part because of the pandemic, and in part because of recognition that it's the right thing to do relative to gender and racial equality. Early education means really good things for a great start for our youngest students getting going. And then when they get into K through 12, they'll be able to perform better. So I'll mention that. And several of our companies are making commitments around job hiring. The idea being that if you have the demand taken care of, then the supply will come along. Oftentimes I've gone to training programs, Laura, around the state, and I'll talk to graduates of the training program, and they've made huge sacrifices to be part of the training program, not to have a promise of a job there afterwards. Huge sacrifice, a huge commitment to their families. They know they need to do better. I met one guy in Springfield who was traveling from Attleboro every day to go to the training program at Tech Foundry on State Street in downtown Springfield. And he didn't have a promise of a job there afterwards. So our employers are saying, you know what, we need to be the people who are promising those jobs. And Bank of America, to continue to name drop on Bank of America, has done this in other jurisdictions as well. So Bank of America, State Street, Mass Mutual, Liberty Mutual, they're all saying the same thing. We're going to make a commitment to hire. And Laura, this is no surprise to you. Jim, this is no surprise to you. When they're hiring, the jobs are all computer science. We're a digital, again, the IBM quote, this is a digital transformation. So the work that you're doing is going to make it possible for our economy and individuals in the economy to have success.
Great. Thank you so much, Jay. I'll let Jim ask some questions. Sorry, Jim.
Yeah, I guess kind of leveraging off that, do you see any initiatives either in the public sector and really open it up not only Massachusetts, but across the country, or in the private sector to try to get more teachers on, say, the elementary, middle school, and high school level have the technical expertise to teach technology at that level?
Yeah. Jim, I can't identify the program. I can identify the anecdote. So, as secretary, got to travel around to a lot of businesses and learned about the concept of externships. And so had a business down the Cape that was bringing in teachers on summer employment, an externship for teachers, and was making sure that the teachers were learning firsthand what was happening in the labs, in the shops, so that they could then go back and instruct their instructors. There's a discussion about that, Jim. We haven't figured out exactly how to do that at scale. So we're trying to replicate that. But in the meantime, Governor Baker, as part of his budget, and it was adopted by the legislature, so bipartisan efforts supported by both the legislature and the administration, has created something called the Career Technical Initiative. So the Career Technical Initiative, this is, it's one of those, why haven't I been doing this all along type of things, that we have these vocational schools that do a great job training kids during the daytime, and then they're dark at night. And so the Career Technical Initiative is meant to bring in comprehensive high school kids who want to get a vocational training after school, and then open up for adult students there afterwards. In order to make all that happen, Jim, we need to make sure that there are more educators that are trained in order to be able to work those hours, right? We can't expect our day school teachers to also hang around at nighttime to train. So part of the Career Technical Initiative, I suspect, is looking at, all right, who's going to be training those people as we emphasize additional technical training.
Yeah, it's very encouraging, Jay. We have time for a couple more questions. Here's one from the audience. What advice do you have for those in the class of 2021 who are looking for jobs right now, especially as they try to balance online classes, mental health, and everything else that somebody that age has to deal with?
First of all, for those from those of us who have gray hair, we want to express our sympathy for those of you who are graduating in 2021 and didn't get to experience the senior year at college, senior year in person at college. In my case, my senior year, not only did I get a cap on a great education, but I also connected with my wife, who was the same class, and so I got both a degree and a life's partner out of the experience. So I can't tell you how sympathetic I am to those of you who are in the situations you're in. Having said that, if you want to be as optimistic as I am, the economy's ready to explode. And for those that are in information and computer science fields, the needs are off the chart. I saw 14,000, as I referenced in my comments yesterday, in computer science in general. Yesterday, I spent some time talking about cybersecurity, which we're thinking about, and I found a figure that there are 15,000 cyber jobs in Massachusetts, fastest growing area of computer science, 350% growth over the last couple of years. So advice. I always used to say internships are the best way in, but a lot of companies aren't offering the internship. So that's a difficulty. That doesn't mean that they're not interested. And so the advice is to identify mentors. I know from having conversations with lots of people at UMass Amherst that there are lots of adult mentors that are available. Identifying mentors who will make introductions for you. It's the kind of the old school way, but the new school way of getting in front of people is identify somebody who knows somebody, and that will work. And Laura, thank you for your work too. I singled out Jamie, but I wanted to say thanks to Laura too. So I would tell you that my experience as a hiring manager, I've been reading a lot of work that people do. So more than just the general resume is really important. You got to figure out how to distinguish yourself. And so more than just the general resume is really important. Some sample work is really helpful. Some more about your work experience is really helpful. But I would say really the best way to go about things now is be relentless in terms of searching for the jobs that are open, because the jobs are open. And trust that there are adults who care enough about you that they want to help. And so I call it, Laura, I'll look at you for a minute. I call it being on Team Laura, right? I'm a member of a number of teams who are trying to help young people get started. No one person, no one adult is going to be able to win the effort for the team, but we can all contribute to the win. And so I would suggest that you build up, that relationship and create a team around you, create a bubble around you, to use the COVID term, create a bubble around you for the good, and that may help out.
Great, thank you, Jay. Have a question that came in through the Q&A, and I'll sort of paraphrase this and broaden it a little bit. If you go to metropolitan areas like Greater Boston, there's a lot more choices in terms of fiber connections to homes and to businesses as you move out western Massachusetts, where we are, and probably the same is true across the country, that in rural areas, you're at sort of a disadvantage when it comes. So the question was really about fiber towns. Do you see that, or perhaps from your experience in government, do you see that as an initiative that will continue and gain momentum?
Yes, absolutely. So when I became secretary, I said yes to the governor, not knowing all the organizations that I was going to oversee, including the mass broadband effort. And so, when we came in 2015, there were 50 Western Mass communities that didn't have access to broadband. I'm happy to say that many of them now have access, and all of them have plans to get access. But that in and of itself is not sufficient enough. So when I talked about the narrow areas of focus for MACP, Jim and whoever asked that question, I hope you'll be happy to hear that one of those narrow areas of focus is a digital divide. We look at it as basic infrastructure. We look at it almost like people look at electricity back in the day. if you're going to compete on the national and international economy, in the national and international economy, you need to have that access to internet. So I'm expecting major initiatives out of state government, in part because the federal government is preparing a major initiative, and you could not be better served than to have Congressman Richie Neal being at the table writing the spending plans for the House when it comes to infrastructure, because I've spent time talking to Richie Neal, including Chancellor Swamy invited me to a dinner that was held on the UMass Amherst campus with Congressman Neal, where we talked about the digital divide. So my expectation is that not only is the state program going to make a difference, but the federal government is ready to put up significant dollars as part of the infrastructure initiative that is probably, I'm not down in Washington every day, but probably is going to be adopted sooner rather than later, and that'll make a difference. So the last thing I'll say about this, Jim, is that many of our CEOs have second homes in out of the way places, and there's nothing like a CEO not being able to get connections that gets people activated as well. So we're all in this together. The pandemic has proven that, and much of the impetus, again, our focus on digital divide comes from their own personal experiences.
Wonderful. That's great. Jim, do you have do we have time for another question?
Yeah, we're about to go into a break, so we'll take a question if you have one, Laura.
Yeah, I just thought before we ended, I would be remiss, given our audience and the focus we all have on research and development, and not asking how your companies are looking at that amongst as a priority, and what they need from the R&D community as we go forward and try to escape the consequences of the pandemic.
Yeah, it's a great question, Laura. And, I want to let you know that even though I'm checking in from Eastern Mass, you all have created a situation where we have to think about UMass Amherst when we're thinking about research, when we're thinking about innovation, when we're thinking about talent. So congratulations on all that you have done. You've made it possible for us to think more than just about a couple of big colleges in Cambridge as being places that we need to turn to. Let's be frank: if you're not doing R&D, if you're not innovating, then you're not competing. And so companies are actually looking for alliances. So the difference that I've seen in the decades that I've been in this work, back in the day, sound like my father now. Back in the day, it was all done internally. You hired the best. You try to hire the best researchers, and you try to keep things secret. And you certainly didn't collaborate with your competitors. MACP right now is at the tail end of cooperating with the Commonwealth, my old office, the Office of Housing and Economic Development, and Mass Tech Collaborative on a FinTech initiative. Around the table on that FinTech initiative is competitors. They know that collectively, in order to succeed, they need to innovate. And once they get that innovation, then they can tailor it to what their needs are. So back in the day, the idea was, let's get the best researchers, let's get the best innovators into our company. Now it's, where are the best innovators and researchers found, and how do we work collaboratively to solve questions that face our sector and face our economy? And then we'll take our chances in terms of being able to take advantage of that and speak to our own business needs. So the UMass Amherst of the world, I hesitate when I say that because there's only one UMass Amherst, are very important to us. And Swamy has done a great job of keeping you in front of us. President Meehan continues to talk to us about all of the UMass opportunities, and many of us are grateful to have the UMass presence in our lives. I spent a lot of time at UMass Amherst, Laura, as you know. When I was secretary, I spent a lot of time at Lowell, spent a lot of time down in southeastern Massachusetts as well. Fortunately, didn't have to spend a lot of time in the medical center, and certainly Boston is my home, UMass. So we care very much about what you're doing, and to the extent that you are doing things new and emerging, you should let us know, because we don't have, we don't have the expertise on everything. And you should know that as we are doing more, we're going to continue to call upon our friends in private institutions, but also in public institutions.
Thank you very much.
Great. Yeah, thank you very much, Laura and Jay for Laura for the overview, Jay for the speech. I have to say, it really checked all my boxes in terms of full educational and entertaining. So really appreciate you spending time with us today. And we're going to move to a break right now. We'll be back at 1:30. So we hope to see everyone back there. And I'm kind of excited to say I'm getting messages through a different channel that we have about 100 or over 100 people tuned into us right now. So we're happy about that. Glad to have you with us, and be back at 1:30.